Okay, thank you.
We'll just take a second. Okay, Brian Whitaker is in the audience. Tim from Goodwill Fire Company. And so far, that's it. And Alice Reel from the paper.
Okay.
I'm the mayor and Rick McCabe, the chief, just came in.
The mayor and the chief, and Janet, we're not in yet, right?
Yeah, we've got the mayor, the chief, and Brian Whitaker, the clerk.
Okay.
And Tim from Goodwill.
Okay, great. If you want to just go ahead and I can go ahead and call the meeting to order. Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Good evening. This is Linda Ratchford, City Council President, and welcome to our special meeting. We are going to be talking about two topics, a municipal complex and a floating dock. And I'd like to welcome everyone and also let you know who the attendees are. We have Councilperson Valerie Leary, Councilperson Suzanne Souter, Councilperson Russell Smith, Councilperson Michael Platt. We also have Mayor Mike Carana and on the call, and City Clerk Brian Whitaker. I also think the treasurer will be joining us soon. We have City Administrator Bill Barthel. We have our City Solicitor Dan Lasco, our Chief of Police Rick McCabe, our Council Secretary Kim Bergmuller, who's the host for this evening, and also Kathy Wierick, our stenographer. So welcome everyone. We will start on the first topic, which is to discuss the need for another feasibility study regarding the municipal complex to take it a step further. So I'm going to at this point ask our City Administrator Bill Barthel to open it up.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. Obviously, obviously we'll talk about the numbers and some of the additional information I've received back from GMB on what we're recommending the next step in the process is. But before I do that, I'd like to remind council that, yeah, we talked about efficiencies and some of the things we could, obtain by combining buildings with MSC as certainly a plus to this whole process and to this venture, if you will. But I'd also like to remind council that at the time when we started talking about this, one of the bigger concerns was safety. Safety for employees. Our building on 220 is not safe at this point in time for anybody. Safety at council meetings. There was, just to remind council at the time, a lot of concern about what was happening within the community and the concern about the fact that there was one entrance in and one entrance out. And, from a safety perspective, how would we deal with that? So again, there were obviously economical issues associated with this, but there were safety issues associated with this. So I've asked the chief to come on tonight to address the safety issues so that you're not hearing it just from me, but from the chief and some of the concerns that, the concerns that he sees in both instances. And that would be not only, again, for the council chambers, but also for, as I said, 220, that doesn't include, or you might want to also comment on Chestnut Street as well. So if the chief could come in, that'd be great.
Thank you. Yeah, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this format doesn't look familiar to me. So, yeah, so I guess a simple way of looking at this is when we train private citizens, companies, schools, anything in active shooters or acts of violence, we teach 3 words basically for people to live by: run, hide, and fight. Many of you probably had this training yourself. So I guess the simple way to try to put a picture behind what we're, describing from a safety perspective is in the situations you're describing on 220 Delaware Street or council chambers, do you have the ability to run? Do you have the ability to hide? And really you don't. Starting with the city office, there's no barrier between the entrance. Once you enter the building, there's really no barrier between your employees and the and the citizens. So that's an issue. And then if something were to go wrong, there's nothing in place to provide a warning to anybody that's not in view. And then there isn't a single location in that building where anybody has egress if there is an issue. You know, the second floor, the only option is out the window. You know, so, and we can get specific. The office is in the back. I think one has a window, but I don't know when the last time anybody tried to open it was. So, so those are some real issues. Going way back to when we were in our trailer, if any of you remember that, that was a selling, not a selling, it was one of the issues that we had was we felt just as vulnerable there. We had something in place with the city office because, you know, we all have folks that aren't happy with the decisions we make, and sometimes it brings the worst in us out. And some employees would get, you know, phone calls from residents that just were, you know, beyond venting and almost towards the threatening end of things. And so we've always had that kind of response in place. So we have, which I'm not really, I think you would appreciate, I'm not going to get into our tactical response to something like this, but we have considered it. And we've considered the fact that we know we're responding to a facility that doesn't allow for egress, if that makes sense. It takes the two parts of the three-part equation in what we train folks to deal with, run, hide, and fight. It takes the run and hide out of it. Because as vulnerable as you are from not being able to egress, there's really nowhere to hide in there either. If we move across the street to council chambers, you're on the second floor of a building that has one way in, one way out. And, you know, not to get too graphic, but as many of you know, I moved from sitting in the front to the back because I just was not comfortable not being able to see who came in. And when you get focused in discussion, you lose that. You know, I certainly wouldn't have been a very good form of protection for, you know, for anybody in that room. So that's it in a nutshell. I mean, I'm certainly, you know, willing to answer any questions if you had any, but I think both facilities really do lack the security you would need.
Chief, I have a question. If we move, well, first of all, in the city office building, I thought there was a back door, which I know doesn't help the second floor, but isn't there a back door for the first floor?
There is, but the only way you're going to get to that back door is if you happen to already be in the back. So if
Okay,
you're
yeah,
in,
the people in the
right.
front can't get there easily.
yeah, and everybody works in that. I mean, you could get lucky in the two back offices shared, you know, but I mean, you'd have to get lucky.
And secondly, if we were to move the council meetings, once we resume meeting in person, to the senior center, as we've previously discussed, I know we have to pay them for that, but it would still be a lot less money than $5 million for a municipal complex. Would you feel that that would be safer?
So I haven't looked at that building. I mean, I've been in it, of course, but I haven't looked at it. I don't know the details enough to be able to say, hey, let's draw a plan. So if we were to do a seminar, we were to train council and, hey, this is what we should do in the event an act of violence were to break out. I'd want to look at everything, you know, ingress, egress, windows, stuff like that, security, barriers. So I wouldn't be able to answer that right now without spending some time in there.
Okay, understand.
This is,
Councilman Platt here. I'm sorry.
go ahead.
You know, we're also just talking about an active shooter or active violence. What about fire? These buildings are how old? A couple hundred?
That's a good point.
I
And that's
mean,
been discussed as well.
Right. Well, and I agree. And Tim, you know, it's from fire department on there. The stairs in the council chambers would burn probably like a matchstick. The trustees are moving out of there for safety concerns. And I guess I have a question for Mr. Losco. Now that we've identified we have a problem and we don't correct it, we are liable. Would that be a correct statement?
Well, liable in what respect? Are you saying
If something happens where you can't protect yourself, where you can't follow one of the three things the chief said, if you can't run, you can't
there's
fight?
theoretical liability? I would agree to that if the city were deemed to have acted in a reckless manner, we have qualified immunity, but if we're deemed to have acted in a reckless manner by ignoring known problems, known security or safety problems, then yeah, that's a possibility.
Well,
Certainly, if members of the public were injured or killed, you could see that.
correct. Well, we've identified a problem. We've hit that step.
Okay, you've answered your own question then, Mr. Platt.
Could have been an attorney.
And
This
and I had a
is
question
Russ
for-
Smith, and this is Russ Smith, and there have been safety problems identified. And, you know, has anybody looked at the admin building and seen if they could be mitigated in some way? My issue is that there hasn't been a professional analysis written down on paper of the need for this campus for MSC and administration to combine. If we keep going forward, and we've already made some steps that we shouldn't have started until we had done that analysis, a professional analysis, I think we're going to be very liable to heavy resident criticism. I've heard some arguments. I trust the chief's analysis, and I think all of that has to be presented in a professional manner as we go forward. I could see some of the rumblings already from some of the residents saying, why are you spending another X amount of dollars on this project? We haven't presented the basic rationale for this project to the residents, and we've already started down that path. And I would say if we're going to spend money, the next step should be let's go back a step and do a professional analysis of the need that we can present to the public rather than just talk about it.
Well, Councilman Platt here again. We're getting an older population, so they're grumbling, having to go upstairs, sit on those hard benches. We have people that bring their own pillows because it's so uncomfortable. And I think an old president once said, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. We were elected to represent people and make the best decisions for the city. And Mr. Barthel put out some pretty good numbers last meeting. And if you're worried about taking heat from the city, there was 3 of us that sat and took a lot of heat for a parking lot that's beautiful. I don't know if anybody's had the time to go down there, but it's absolutely beautiful. We've had 2 council people had their houses vandalized. They stuck with the job. They've done the right things. And I think that's where we're at. If you're worried about taking the heat, I'm sorry, you don't belong in this job.
Wow, Mr. Platt,
I'm
this
gonna
is
let that go.
Councilperson Larry, and I find what you say just so absolutely insulting to Councilperson Smith. He didn't say he can't take the heat, and much like I'm going to say, I agree with him. We need to quantify or qualify, again, I'm not sure of the terminology, the need for a new campus to the people we represent. And
You
again,
just have.
I haven't.
really, I see only a couple of people on here. They don't represent the whole city.
I haven't seen a professional analysis. I've seen some opinions. I think Chief McCabe's analysis was good. We need to present that to the public in a professional, published manner. But before we do anything, our residents need to know why we're spending this kind of money. And that's it. And I will take offense saying if you can't stand the heat, Mike. In my career, I've taken the heat on a national level, and it's not about heat. It's about unnecessary controversy when we go forward to try to do something for the good of the city.
You know, we took a lot of flack when we spent $2 million on Delaware Street. Nobody cared about that. We just spent that money. Nobody cared. Granite curbs. There's only one person against it, myself. They look beautiful. I'm not going to argue that. Nobody cared when we spent $20,000 on decorative lamp posts on 6th Street. That was okay too. Why don't we put a campus in the center of town where it would serve all neighborhoods, and it will be safe, and it'll be easier to access. You walk into our city office and you ask my opinion, it's a disgrace. You got a lobby that's 100 years old. It holds 3 people, even in good times. Okay, it's a disgrace. It really is. I mean, it looks like something out of Mayberry with the swinging gates.
Which I think is actually very nice. So
And that would all
it's
go,
all about personal opinion.
and that would all go into professional analysis, and the hard seats would go in there too. I've sat there and I don't care for it either.
You know, this sounds like one of those arguments where we did a study and they said, take the traffic lights out, put stop signs in. And people complained. So they said, let's do another study. So we did another study. And the study said, take the traffic lights out. We went against that study. So in my opinion, I don't care what study we put in front of you, your mind's made up that this isn't going to happen. So why spend the money on that study? I mean, the numbers are there. Why don't we want to centralize everything in this town?
Thank you for thinking.
If you look at that where the police station is, that's probably the center of town geographically.
Mike, taking a professional approach isn't necessarily opposition.
I'd like to hear from Council President Ratchford and Councilperson Souter on their opinions.
I'll start. First of all, Mr. Bartel, I understand that part of the CARES Act money was spent on an alarm system in the city office, and I thought that was intended to somewhat deal with the issue of public access with just that little swinging gate. Was I wrong about that? And what did that do?
That alarm, basically, if somebody wanted to push through that door, quite frankly, they could. It just gives our employees in this time of through COVID. Now, I will grant you this, it is much safer than it was, but that was put in there so that people can't, we can have some sort of, normal people who just want to come into the office. We have some sort of barrier there to say, well, hold on, we'll come. What do you want to come? What do you want to do coming in here? And you're correct, that would work, but go over and shake that door a little bit. And if a guy's out there who really wants to get in, it really wasn't intended as that type of safety device.
So
but you are correct,
them,
but yes, we did use that money for that device.
So maybe it slows them down a little bit and it gives warning to the employees, but that's about it.
That's what I would say. But I mean, I think it's better than what we had, without a doubt. But that's a really good point, because we've got now this little buzzer there that is keeping normal people, if you will, at bay, and that's our safety device. So, but anyway, but you make a good point. That is correct.
This is Council President Ratchford. It's a buzzer, really. You buzz if you want to enter, which
Correct.
is the same system that MSC at Chestnut Street has had, and they've had some. They have had some security concerns. They've beefed up their security concerns.
Right.
But they've had issues, even though, they have. I think that in terms of, to me, there's two things that really strike me. I mean, one is the whole functionality of our meeting space. Our technology is very, very difficult in that room. There's some draft legislation, which I think you've all seen, which basically says when you move to doing virtual and also doing in public, then you have to, you basically have to have all fancy stuff to portray in your meeting room all the other people that are still virtual. And hopefully that will eventually go away. But even then, we have difficulty on technology in that particular room. We have difficulty on people hearing in that room. We tried to correct it. And we're looking, we could sink $20,000 in it, but we're not sure it's even going to fix it. The other thing is we don't have a space for meetings like we've done for Planning Commission or for bid public meetings, or for something that the community might need as a public meeting. We're talking about multi-purpose space. We also send people around the block to get stuff. I mean, so it's not just us, it's also MSC, because our decisions affect MSC. I mean, someone could do one-stop shopping instead of being sent from one building to the other. And even in MSC case, you might have to go from MSC building to their other building near the police station. So from that standpoint, and I think that they're also some definitely some synergies. I think the city administrator, if you could, Mr. Barthel, if you could identify some of the ones you came up with, realizing these won't pay for it all, although we would sell some property. I think that, those are worth noting. So if you could kind of run through some of those.
Sure.
Actually, before Mr.
Before we
Bartel
keep-
starts, if I may, Suzanne Souter here, sorry. Don't people do more of their business with the city online than in person now? And if not, could we make it possible for them to do things online, which they probably prefer even than going to a single office building versus 2 or 3 office buildings at a much lower cost than building this new complex?
We don't have, yeah, well, obviously we don't have as many people stopping by as before because of the COVID restrictions. However, we put that bell in there, the alarm or the buzzer, if you will, in there because we do have people that stop by. We still have people, even though we have the notes on the door and people were just entering, pretty much people were still coming in. And when things get back to normal, we also get a lot of people who come in looking for information about the city. We get people who come in who just have general questions who are visitors from out of town. And yeah, you're correct. We didn't have obviously as many people come and pay, for example, with their taxes with cash this year as we have in past years, but as a result of the COVID experience. Now we do also get a lot of people or in the past who want to come in. They want to come in and pay their taxes in person. They want to come in and they want a receipt. Now, is that trend going to continue as the population going to get younger or older? I don't have that, I don't know, but I would assume that you're still going to get a lot of people that still want to come down, get the receipt. People need to come into the office and talk to, for example, Jeff about, you get contractors that come in that need to lay out plans and that type of thing. You would think we'd have more people paying online taxes with credit cards and that as well. And I don't know the actual statistic on that. I believe it's gone up, obviously, to your point, than it was in previous years. So yes, some of that is happening, but you still have people that want to come in and want to face-to-face with the administrator, with the code enforcement person. Not everybody wants to get on and do a Facebook. And the other thing I'll say on this, in that regard, Ms. Souter, is that in particular with MSC, I mean, those people, they still have a lot of people that are showing up and making payments. I think you have the drop-through window or whatever that they can do that. I'm not sure if they're letting people in at this point. So a lot of that is still going on with them. And I would assume that, again, when we get back to some sort of normalcy, we have people from going to MSC who come to our building and say, this is what I want. I want to pay the water. Oh, no, you have to go over there. We've had people go over there who need to come over here. Now, you can say it's only a couple of blocks, but I think to Mrs. Ratchford's point, again, it's in the overall picture of things, you're offering a one-stop shop kind of an opportunity for people and more efficiencies and those types of things. So now, whether or not, you feel that those are efficiencies that, you want to offer to your constituents, I mean, obviously that I would think would be things you would want to take into consideration in the big picture. So,
Okay, I'll just, Suzanne Souter again, I'll just say, I'm sure people would appreciate those greater efficiencies. I think they would appreciate more being protected from rising sea level. And we can't really afford to spend, $5 or $10 million, whatever it is, on both simultaneously. And I don't think we know how much the sea level rise mitigation is going to cost us yet. I think that the municipal campus sounds like a great idea, but I don't think it's our top priority right now. I think dealing with sea level rise in terms of spending a large amount of money, I think that's our priority. And I think we can adjust some of the other things, for example, potentially moving meetings to the senior center, both to be more comfortable on the ground floor and to provide greater security and to provide greater sound, greater technology for people to hear and for recording proper, all those things in that newer building for at least a few years until we see how the sea level rise issue is going to shake down. And then we can come back to the municipal campus issue. I'm not saying never do the municipal campus. I'm just saying I don't think it's our top priority right now.
well, and again, and I'm not believe me, I'm not arguing with you. I mean, you make a point, you make a very good point that obviously that's a concern of the city, and the council, this council and councils prior, Mrs. Ratchford as council president has, led that charge in terms of the types of things we're looking at. I will say this though, from experience in regard to doing the dikes, since at the time we did them, and we were able to, we basically received about $8 to $10 million from the state. I forget what the actual number was to do it, but we did it, and we did it in a very short period of time. Again, I'm not saying that necessarily can repeat itself, and I think we're absolutely doing the right thing for preparing for at what point in time are we going to, either decide to increase those heights or whatever it is we're going to do, and we're in a much better place now, because from a planning perspective than we were 10 years ago, when no one had done anything for 30 years in regard to those dikes and those things, and we accomplished it. We got it done. And so all I'm saying is that I would just ask that, okay, and I haven't even gone through some of these other numbers yet, but I absolutely understand where you're coming from. I'm just simply saying, I think you can chew gum and you can have a couple of balls in the air, at least from even from an evaluation perspective. Here's where we're at. Let's see what this, and just keep moving this along. And then if you get to that point where, okay, we see a hard number, then at least you can have a discussion on that hard number. We're not there yet.
No, we're not. Go ahead, Ms. Ratchford.
President Ratchford, one couple of, I want to make a comment on lesson that online, but in the prior council, we spent a lot of effort on moving things online because we were frankly behind, and I think we can continue to move things online. I do think that we need to make it clear, we are not obligating the city to $5 million. Number one, we're not even sure what it would cost, because I think we weren't quite there on the concept. We are obligating the city to a finite amount of money to take the next step and identify the possibility to solve some of our problems. I think that there's some comments about having it on paper in terms of maybe Mr. Barthel can kind of run through some of the things that we know are obvious things. I think the benefit of a multi-purpose building and the safety and all that, that's going to be hard to quantify, but I think it's a huge benefit for the city. So when you look at that, and if we look at some other new concept that, maybe the new concept leaves the trolley barn as it is, or maybe the new concept takes the trolley barn and makes it a building, for more office space. So, we really don't know what we're dealing with or how much it's going to cost, and even if we had a plan, we wouldn't do all of the plan. We just like we do now, we don't buy all new vehicles every year. We go step by step. So I think if Ms. Souter had a comment, and then have Mr. Barthel kind of summarize what we do know would be beneficial. Ms. Souter, do you have?
I think.
Well, yes, that I'm not saying never ever do the municipal complex. I can see the advantages of it. And if we didn't have to worry about sea level rise, I'd be in favor of moving forward with those plans now. But we do have to deal with sea level rise. And once we have a clearer idea of how much that's going to cost, I think we'll be in a better position to make a decision about moving forward with the municipal complex. That's all.
Councilperson Leary here. Where are we on the whole solving the sea level? Where are we on that timeline? Because I know we've had study and a study and a study. Where are we on this?
Well, council just, go ahead, Matt. I'm sorry, Mrs. Ratchford, go ahead.
We're getting closer. We have a whole plan on what information we need to design the right system. But even once we design the system, it's going to be, we're not talking about next year. We're talking maybe something you start building in 10 years would be my estimate. I will ask at the next meeting if we can have an update on that, since we just received a grant and we just allocated money. But we're plugging away, and there are lots of things we can keep doing. But I agree that we can do two things at once. And in both cases, we haven't said, oh, yeah, let's go, spend $1 million, because that's a lot of money. And we have no intent. Well, number one, the city would never spend the 10 million. The city itself. We're talking about a combination thing. So I think that we can have an update, but we don't have plans at this point because we need more information. So.
Madam President, if I may just remind Mrs. Leary and the rest of council, you just voted to fund another, as you say, study, but another step, as Mrs. Ratchford points out, in that process. You just approved $33,000 as a match to another part of that whole study and gathering parts of those building blocks. So, you know,
my thing is, we've just heard about it for so many years, and that's fine approving the study. I mean, you know, it needs to be done, but it's like, does anyone know how many you need? and when you're going to get there? And Linda just gave what she feels is her best guess timeline of 10 years. And I'm like, well, you know, so.
I think it depends. Well, I think it all depends upon, and this is what these guys have been, what the folks have been saying, the folks from DENREC and the folks we've been working with, Dave Athey and those folks. Again, it's, you know, we're putting together these, again, okay, the studies that will give us more of an idea of what the final solution should be, and then how long it will take to actually do that and what the costs are of that. And I think Linda's correct. I think the number has been about the horizon that has been talked about is about a 10-year horizon, but it's not definitive at this point. So do you want me to?
Yeah, a couple other quick things on sea water, which is a huge, important topic. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's been very important to myself and to this council. The study is not just studying randomly. There's a step based on what the expert, this was actually looking at actual elevations as opposed to, you know, some high level model. This is going to look at what do you need to do, structures, what would you need, because there are lots of alternatives. And it doesn't mean we haven't done anything all this time, because we've been taking stepwise through other things that have immediate benefit in terms of trying to reduce flood insurance costs, that for example, and address some other building issues. So I think that it is a huge project, but we're not just willy-nilly studying it. We have sat with the state people and the experts, and we've said, what's the next step? And unfortunately, these all cost money too. And we're getting closer all the time. So I would think at this point, if you would talk about what you can tell us, I mean, I think we want to make sure we address the issues brought up by Mr. Smith and Ms. Leary and others in terms of cost savings. I think we have to focus on the office, because I'm not sure we can do a cost savings on the meetings.
Linda, Ms.
Yeah.
Bratchford, if I can just say, you know, you made good justifications for the complex. Bill did, Mike did. Can we just have our contractor do a justification for this new city complex, something written on paper that we can base our decision on and go to the public with? That's all I'm asking. I'm done.
Councilman Fader, I thought that's what the night's meeting to spend the money was for, to put the concept together for that reason.
No, it was not. It wasn't to justify. It was to go on with further design rather than to justify having a design at all.
Okay. Well, I just want to backtrack just a second, because I'm new on a little bit of this stuff. Sea level rise. How much money has the city spent over the last 10, let's say 10 years on the city itself? No state grants, no federal grants, nothing, just the city. Ballparks, fair enough.
10 years. I would say that the honest answer to that, now you're talking about studies, or are you talking about actual construction?
I'm talking about actual work.
The majority of that money we went out and we got from the state, and we got from our legislators, and that's the other side of that coin. I mean, you have to look at it. Yeah, we're responsible for the properties and the residents, without a doubt. But there's other interests there that are outside of the city of Newcastle, the county, the state, who has state roads running by here. And so this is very important infrastructure for the state. So that $8 million, which is what I believe the dikes cost, that we elevated, the three dikes that the 3 dikes that we, that was $8 million. And that the majority of that money came from the state. And so let me just say, since you asked the question, so back in 2009 or 2010, we put together a commission at that point in time to study similar to what we're putting together now. And as I said, nothing had been done at that point for 30 years. And we were facing, and I'll agree, you know, we were facing, okay, what's it going to cost to go ahead and repair these dikes if the city has to do it? And the numbers that were being bantied around were 7 to 10 million. And as I said, the state came up with about 8 million. And you're 100%, the city itself, in the time frame that it would take to do that, is next. I don't want to say it's impossible. You know, we need to look at everything, as Ms. Souter is saying, but as representatives, I would encourage you to be talking to state legislators now. And we're getting this information from DENREC and that type of thing to say to them, how are you going to help us? You know, we're just this little cog here. How are you going to help us to fund these huge projects? Not when, you know, well, can you give me 10 million today? We need it. No, we should be having that dialogue now. So I will be honest, I think the majority of the construction work that was done was provided to us by the state.
And I would conclude just from what you said, this isn't a $5 or $6 million project. This is a $100 million project.
We don't know.
Well,
I don't know that it would
well,
be.
we don't know that, right? That's what I'm saying.
Right.
So that's even worse yet. That's still, 2009, 2010, that's, 11 years ago, still nothing done. Or I'm sorry, we spent $8 million. I apologize. That was, but the city's not going to have $8 million to rebuild the dikes or $100 million to rebuild. We've got a better chance of putting our campus together, keeping us safe, keeping people safe. And Mr. Smith's point about, reasons, a lot of intangibles. Just, drive down Delaware Street someday and look at the 2 construction trucks parked out back with or out front with their trailers. And then they drive out, pick up their permit from Jeff. Then you went through all that. There's a lot of reasons. I say we move forward. I think President Ratchford had an excellent point. We're not building a building tomorrow. We'll put a study together and concepts to see where we can go.
But Suzanne's out of here. My point is, there are so many unknowns with the sea level rise issue. No, we're probably not going to have to pay for all of it, but we don't know how much we are going to have to pay. If we do this municipal campus and spend $5 million, we're going to have to float a bond issue or whatever, and we're going to be paying that back over what, 20, 30 years? Can we afford to be paying back 2 $5,000 loans over the next 20 or 30 years simultaneously? Or do we want to have a clearer idea of where we stand with the sea level rise issue before we decide to invest further in a municipal complex? And in the meantime, we can do some things to provide better safety and convenience in terms of primarily moving the council meetings and other meetings to the senior center. That would cost some money, but not as much as we're talking about. So I just think we need to look at the long range, big picture and consider both issues together, not look at them in tunnel vision at one, not without considering the impact of the other.
So this is Council President Rashford. So the question on the table is whether we proceed to, is there a reason to proceed to the next step? There's also the question, I guess, a good understanding of what the next step would be. And I'll ask Mr. Barthel to go through that.
Based on
Your
prior to
GM,
this,
yeah,
based on what we've looked at, not counting what Mr. Smith is proposing.
Well, I think you need to answer his question too, because I'm not clear what he's asking for. So we would need a better clarity around that. Maybe he could, outline some things for you.
Right. I certainly can tell you, council, I can present to council what we think the next step would be based on, the information, as I told you earlier, from GMB. But again, I'm not sure when you say you want to a professional analysis. I guess, I think I know what you're saying, but it sounds like not everybody else. I don't know. Mr. Smith.
Well, Bill, maybe it's just a justification, just a roundup for all these reasons that, I'm hearing tonight from the chief and from Linda, from you. I don't see that anywhere all in one place saying, hey, this is why we're doing this. This is the need and this is why we're doing it. It's I've never seen a project where everybody just sits around the table and says, I feel this, I feel that, therefore let's spend $5.5 million. It needs to be justified openly and on paper somewhere.
I'll concur. I'm not even sure why that, I mean, everybody looks so perplexed. I think it's a reasonable answer. I think a summary, maybe summary justification is a better term, a summary of what Linda said and the chief has said and Bill's, a summary in there. And it's
Okay, if I may, Mrs. Leary, I'm not perplexed. I think I understand what Mr. Smith is saying. I'm just looking for direction from council. And I will say this, however, because I want this on the record, I'm not suggesting, I don't think anybody here is suggesting that this project should be done at the hurting our chances to go ahead and address the issues that Ms. Souter is talking about. I don't think anybody here is saying that. I won't speak for the council president or Mr. Platt, but I will say, as I said before, I again still think that you have the resources at this point to go to what I think is the next step, which I'm prepared to talk about, which would be identifying 2 more options within our own boundaries to determine if in fact that would be something that we could actually accept. And then the next step after that would be to go and address, okay, the square footage of that particular shoebox, if you will. Those are the next 2 steps that I'm prepared tonight to discuss. If council thinks that in the meantime, they want to wait till we can, just put everything together, then that's obviously that's up to you. But again, I just want to make it clear, nobody is saying that we would, because the last thing I want to see, and which I would suspect we may, is that, we're advocating here against the dikes and that type of thing. And I can assure you, we are not. We are trying to do a couple of things at one time.
And I'd also remind, this is Council President, we are not deciding to go ahead with this complex, even if we decide to do the next study. It's basically to understand whether it's feasible, how much is going to cost. And so I guess, Mr. Barthel, if you could tell us how much money we're talking about, if we, and it may be a little 1.5 steps, what we're talking about, what it would do. We might want to show the pictures again. And then I think we're going to have to, at this point, wrap this up.
Sure. Okay, what I did at the last council meeting, if you all recall, I think at that time I said, I projected, again, savings based upon the items I could identify that we would be a 50% savings by having the ability to share that with MSC. And the number that I had was about $281,700 over a 30-year period, which equated to $9,390 a year. Okay, again, on average. I didn't include the taxes we would then be getting from the sale of 220 Delaware Street, which would be roughly $2,400 a year, which would then give us it's almost $12,000 a year, okay, that we would identify in those types of savings. Now, the other thing I pointed out was this, that we will also experience other economies once we get together and we can figure out how to share jobs, personnel, that type of thing. But I can't put a number on that at this point because I don't know what exactly that would be. So that's number one. We talked about that. The other thing I want to mention to council tonight is we received notice from the county that a property in town just sold for $30,650,000 and that we will be receiving $459,750 in transfer tax in December for that. Okay, so let that sink in a little bit because that's a good message no matter what we do. Okay, that's almost $60,000 in transfer tax that we'll get for the sale of that one property. So for the purposes of my calculations for this evening, Mrs. Ratchford, to your point, I said, okay, let's, again, hypothetically, let's say the city took 100,000 out of that and said, we're going to designate $359,750 to this project. And so then what I did was I said, okay, looking at concept A, which, as you said, is currently listed at about $10 million. I said, if council sets a budget, let's say council sets its budget at 7 million and we divide that by 2 and we will receive, again, once we get to phase 3, we'll get a more accurate description of what the cost of the construction is going to be. But so let's say council set its budget at $7 million. Now, here's what I want to point out. In the proposal that we received, there were 2 proposals from them for council chambers. And what I did was I said, okay, council chamber 2, Kim, if you want to put that up now, if you would, please. but I'll keep talking. So council chamber 2, okay, which is obviously the council chamber on the right, okay, is 1,860 square feet. So I said, taking a square foot cost of the whole project, which GMB gave us for concept A, again, I have to use something to base it on, was $287 a square foot. So if I take that $1,860 or 1,860 square feet times $287, in theory, and again, it's not going to work out exactly like this, but you're going to be spending about $534,000 on a new council chamber. So why I'm bringing this to your attention is, and pointing this out, is because you're not spending all of this money just on new office space. Remember, you're also getting a new council chamber with, upgraded technology, the safety factors that you have, and the efficiencies that we would be able to obtain from that by being, within the same building. So that being said, I then said, okay, going back to the $3,500,000 cost for the whole project, I estimated that we could sell Delaware Street for about $400,000, and I think that's conservative. And you might argue it's high, but I used $400,000. If I took the $359,750 transfer tax from the garrison, that takes the project down to $2,740,000. 3.5% interest for 30 years on that is $147,660 a year. Then I took the minus the approximate savings of roughly $12,000 would mean that you're at about it would cost the city for a 30-year period $135,870. Now that would assume no assistance from any state agency. That would assume no assistance from the trustees. That would be that the city would then bear for that time period. Now, you also remember that I've talked about, I believe that by combining facilities and combining or getting together in that one facility or proximity, that you would also avoid having to hire, which I think you're going to have to do at some point, a public works director. But I've indicated that would be about $90,000. So you'd be looking at roughly $46,000 a year if you take out that $90,000. Now, if you don't want to do that, that's fine. So then at the end of the day, you're looking at about $136,000 a year for 30 years to do that, based on those numbers that I just, kind of rattled off. Go ahead.
So at this point, this is Council President. If there any, I would have council, if there are questions about this analysis that Mr. Raphael's done, let's answer those. And the next step is if we do clearly define what we would be considering for approval.
Okay, yeah. So are there any questions before I go to that?
I don't know if this can be done, but in trying to write down everything you said, I wasn't fast. I can't write that fast. Is there a way to get that analysis on paper?
Yeah, I can get that to you.
Thank you.
Suzanne Souter, I was just going to ask the same question. I couldn't catch all those numbers that quickly. If you could just summarize it for us, that would be very helpful.
Sure,
In an
no
email
problem.
or something.
Okay. So the next step, as we discussed, or as I'm proposing now, is that since option A and B aren't really viable, the next step would be to look at potentially one or two other options that we can do within our own complex. And the cost to do that would be $13,500, and that would be times 2, because the MSC would have half of that cost as well. And then that would then get to the point where you'd say, okay, yeah, either this works, A and B, the new A and B works, or it doesn't. If it does, and you want to go to the next step, then that goes to, which we were gonna do, which would have been about another $15,000 from the city to get into, more of the details, more of the square footage, more of the actual specific needs, those types of things. So if council decided that they wanted to get this to the point where, okay, now we have much better construction numbers, we have a better idea of what the overall cost is going to be, to get to that point would be roughly $30,000, a little short $30,000.
Is that city?
Yes, total.
Okay. There would be,
No, total city, yeah. So it'd be about 60 combined.
And we've already put 15,000 into the concept study, correct?
Correct.
On the city side. So that was 30.
Correct. I believe it was a little more than that. But let me also, to give that a little relevance. Okay, we've just spent 6 months looking at garbage cans, and we still haven't made a decision on that. So we're talking about a pretty significant project here that we're just not going to be able to. I mean, it would have been great if at the first get-go we could have said, yeah, this is exactly what we want. So this is going to include. This is going to. We're going to have to put a little more effort and study into that to get to that point.
Councilman Platt here. Personally, I think we go ahead with the study. Let's see where it's at. If Mr. Smith has concerns, maybe he can write up a report for everyone, present it next council meeting, pros and cons. He has them all. I mean, no professional is going to say any different than what we're saying right now, as far as that goes. And if we spent a lot of money on other studies, we might as well continue on this one. It's not a project that's going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen over the next 10 years, probably 5 years. But it's time to look at it. Money's cheap to borrow. If it's just time to start rolling along, or interest rates start going back up. And I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen in the future. We might as well, I say we move forward with it.
My rate is $90 an hour. I'll work you up an estimate.
You got to send me a
If
contract.
council approves it.
Okay. So are we ready to make a decision, or does it sound like we need some more information and then go through it again?
So I'd like to see summary justifications. I'd like to see a summary of the numbers that Mr. Barthel gave, because we couldn't write them down enough. And then I guess that together, we have to decide if we want to go forward. So if we have this information for reference, and if we go forward with the study, then we have all of that together.
Who's going to, and I'm just asking, because Mr. Smith had originally said hire someone to write the justification. Is that still what you're considering, or is it something that you want us to do? I mean, because I pretty much.
Could you include that in the contract, Bill?
We can, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you mean with these guys, or are you being in the contract with you?
Oh, hey, I'll get you a price.
I suppose we could. I mean, we could go back and listen. I can certainly go back, and it would be, you know, we could do anything.
Just make, you know, in your next presentation, please make a summary of the justifications for this project.
I mean, they were stated here. I'd just like to see them all in one place.
Yeah.
Just like the numbers, all in one place. So they're there for reference.
And then what the next step would bring us, and then because we wouldn't even be approving the second step, we would just, you know, get a sense of whether we go to the next step. So because it's a point of time on each decision. So at this point, so we will have the city administrator to go back, and I would encourage him to talk to council members to make sure we have a good understanding. I will tell you this, Municipal Services Commission is very strong on their interest in terms of moving forward. Their office space is maybe safer than ours, but you know, it's not very good if you've been in Chestnut Street. They are very interested in this topic too. So at this point, we will wait to hear back. Move on to anything else? We move on to our next topic. Okay, this what we wanted to talk about tonight was the floating dock. We've had some conversations about that. In the past, I understand Tim Moore is on the call, and he gave an explanation of how the benefits would be for the Goodwill Fire Company. So I thought we could, you know, maybe I think there were some questions from council. Maybe if we could start there.
This is Councilperson Larry. I just want to clarify right off. This isn't new money. This is money that's left over, and it's specifically for this. Is that correct?
No, it's actually, it's additional funds. It's 520,000 additional funds that is available from the state.
Okay, so it's not city money. It's available from the state.
Correct.
For a floating dock.
Correct.
It's not 520,000 that can go, because, you know, people will ask this because it happens all the time. And you went through this, and Linda's been through it, and I've been through. It's not $520 we can put in to repairing the streets in Washington
It
Park.
will go back, if the city does not use it, it will go back to the state, and they will decide, the General Assembly or
Right.
DENREC or whomever will decide where that net money should be placed.
So considering this is 520,000 of someone else, the state's money, not the city's money, and it is specifically for this floating dock, which I think we validated more than 50% the need for it, especially with the fire company and some other things. I'm kind of thinking, I'm not sure, well, I'm for it, especially since it's not coming out of the city coffers per se. It is coming from the state, which it is taxpayer money, but if we don't use it, we lose it. So.
And it comes from a special fund from the state, if I'm correct, from DENREC. So it doesn't go back into the general treasury. It means somebody else gets a dock.
Well, I would normally agree with that, but under the current circumstances with the economy and with what the state is, going through, I don't know if, I mean, you're probably correct, but I don't know. I don't know if, at the end of the day, they decided. But at the end of the day, you're right. If you don't use it, or if we don't use it, we lose it. Now, I will tell you, the estimate that we had on what you're looking at was 570,000. So there will be city funds that will be needed. Now, of course, we haven't done anything. We haven't gone to bid with it other than to get a price from the people who built the pier. And I believe that number was 570. So the city will have to allocate some money for this.
Councilman Flett, we're also going to have to allocate money to rebuild the ramp at the sailing club, correct?
No, that was the fire company seeking funds from other sources for that. Timmy, I know you mentioned that before.
Yeah. Mr. Is he on? Because he talked, please.
Yes, can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, everybody can hear you.
Yes, the fire company is taking on that responsibility of having funds for the ramp. Currently, where we stand right now, we did get $100,000 that is allocated for that. We are currently waiting on a contract to come back from the engineering firm, so that way we can move forth with the ramp. We should be getting that contract probably here in the next week or two is my guess. And we will be seeking additional funds come January in order to hopefully get the full amount for that ramp. The ramp, just so you guys are aware, the ramp that will be going in will be as is the ramp that's currently there. The only difference is the riprap on either side of the current ramp, it will be better. And the ramp will extend out to 125 feet instead of what it currently is now.
So it will be, this is Council President, so it'd be a longer ramp with more riprap and will allow you to more easily put the boat in when there's shallow water. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The riprap that's currently there now is undersized for the tidal water that moves through there. So the new riprap with the new ramp, two things. It'll be larger riprap, and then with this new ramp on the ends or the sides of the ramp is what they call turn downs. So the concrete will actually be 18 inches deep on either side. So that will not allow water to undermine the ramp and wash out the underneath of the ramp, which is currently happening now with the current ramp.
And could you just summarize, I know we talked about this, I mean, just real quickly summarize the benefits of also having a floating dock and how that would be used?
So with the floating dock, it will allow the fire company to keep the boat in the water for a good portion of the year. I'm just going to throw a time frame out there. Don't hold me to it. Mother Nature, will have effect on this. So figure it starts getting nice around April to keep a boat in. So from April to, and given the weather that we've been having here lately, here it's we're into December already and the weather's nice. So it would be a judgment call on the officers at the fire company on how long that boat stays. But just say that floating dock was there currently, our boat would still be in the water due to the weather. So it will cut down on the response times in order for us to make access on the river. We wouldn't have to trailer the boat, down 3rd Street to the boat ramp. We wouldn't have to worry about cars being in the way. In the past, we've had, especially when it's nice during the spring, summer, fall, everybody wants to get out, and also we've had issues with cars blocking the ramp, and having to call the police to do what they do. So it minimizes that aspect. So response times will go down. We would only be taking, instead of trailering the boat, obviously we just hop in the vehicle. Wouldn't be a fire truck. We have a small marine rescue unit or utility vehicle. We would hop in that and a crew would go down, hop on the boat and go. So that would cut anywhere between, depending upon if we have a crew in station or not, that cuts probably about 5 minutes off, roughly. And then if God forbid there was an incident out on the waterway, 2 boats collided, wave runners, there's an incident on a ship, it allows us to take the injured party and bring it to a specific area that is easy to extract them from the water. So currently now, God forbid if something were to happen, depending upon where on the river it happens, we would take them back to either 3rd Street or we would go to a rinky-dink ramp that is underneath the Delaware Memorial Bridge. And that's how we get paid. That's how we get people out of the water and to a stretcher or onto an ambulance. So with at least with the floating dock, there's we can just pull right up to a dock. It's a safer platform. We can bring a stretcher right on down, load them on the stretcher, and right on out. If there is a mass casualty where 2 boats collided, it allows for first responders as in ambulances. It gives them a turnaround point. They can go down, they can turn around, get loaded up and go. It's a triage system is what we call it in the first responder world. I know Valerie's familiar with it. So that is a benefit as well.
How many runs do we do in the Delaware?
Runs as in that
As
we
calls for service on the Delaware.
I would say a safe number would be anywhere between 40 and 50 calls on the Delaware River.
How many rescues that needed transportation? You can ballpark it. I mean, I'm just asking these questions.
Yeah, no, I understand. We've been pretty fortunate where we haven't had any lately that we brought to the Newcastle area. We have had incidences down in Delaware City area and Port Penn area. I will say this though, when an individual has a bad day and decides they think they can fly but don't, we bring them to underneath the bridge. So if someone wants to jump off of a bridge, we bring them under the bridge, and that's how we get them out of the water, because technically they have to be pronounced. So and that happens probably in a year's time. That happens probably 10 to 15 times.
Yeah, and Tim, I'm just asking these questions because I was an EMT back in the '80s, so I mean I got a little bit of knowledge, and I know a lot has changed. In that case, response time really doesn't matter once they jump off the bridge, correct? I mean,
Well,
in reality.
Well, I will say yes and no. There's a lot of factors that go into it. For the most part, they're not lucky. But however, some do require care. So, you know, technically we can't just declare someone dead. But I've had cases where people have jumped and they have survived. And I've had cases where people have jumped and we've worked them for reasons that they shown that needed to be, they needed medical attention. So, but for the most part, yes, but just keep in mind though, although when someone has a bad day like that, everybody's the same. And I'm not saying that, that you don't feel that way. That's not the case at all. But, you know, it's all about getting out quick because it's an incident for us, because unfortunately you never know, because not all the time, the call taker and the dispatch center, they get the information correct. And, you know, the person that's doing the call in could be hysterical. They might misinterpret them. So I know we've had incidences like that where things have been misinterpreted. So
the idea is that if someone's standing on the bridge, they can get the equipment out to below the bridge. And if they jump, it's a better chance of locating that person or the body, depending on how the outcome is. Because if they don't find it kind of soon, the current takes it and it's going to wash up on the shore somewhere. So being able to get out while they're still on the bridge, and hopefully someone on the top of the bridge stops them from jumping, that's great. But if they do jump, it's good to have the equipment there already. So
I mean, plus also just keep in mind that bridge is monitored 24/7.
Right.
So when the bridge police, they pinpoint and they have someone detailed strictly watching that once that comes across. So they watch the whole thing. They tell us, you know, when they jump and all that. The bridge police, they throw markers down. So that way it gives us a vicinity, you know, on where to search, just in case we don't necessarily, it's not visible to us.
So Mr. Platt, what is it you're trying to validate the number of runs to?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a lot of money. We're not
having the boat ready at the dock.
spending a lot of money and there's no study being done. I mean, and I also like to know if there's other uses for the dock. Can we run a water taxi to Delaware City? Can we run it up to Wilmington to the waterfront? I mean, I just think it's a lot of money, and I think the question should be asked. If my numbers are right, and Tim, I won't hold you to them because I know they were ballpark. You said 40 calls a year on the Delaware, and you said 15 to 20 of them are jumpers. So that's about 45% that are jumpers that we're responding to.
We're responding to all those calls.
Well,
right, but I mean, 45% would be jumpers off the bridge.
Actually, it's about 25% to 30, but what you're trying to say is some people are worth it and some people aren't. So
No, I didn't say that, Valerie. I'm just asking questions.
So Mr. Moore, if you could you run down that, how many total, I mean, you have so many total per year, and then of those per, I guess, or so many are unfortunately people trying to commit suicide off the bridge.
Rather than ask Mr. Moore to ballpark and to guess, why doesn't he can go back to the fire company and they can look up the numbers for the past 5 years of what they've had. So he can actually give something, Timmy, not that you're not being accurate, but if Mr. Platt is going to make a decision based on numbers, and it's best to have the actual numbers.
And I also asked the other purpose for the dock.
Pardon, would you repeat that?
We couldn't run, from what I understand, the last meeting we had, it was for 2 boats. We couldn't run a water taxi to Wilmington's waterfront, to Delaware's waterfront. People can use our restaurant, see our town.
You could definitely do that. Yeah, that's what it's designed for, is that it's a commercial facility only, not a marina. Mr. Barthel, you have a comment?
No, you pretty much answered the question, Mrs. Radford. Yes, and when we initially designed this portion, this phase 2, if you will, of it, when it was designed, it was for the purposes of exactly the things you talked about, Mr. Platt, and it was also for bringing in, dinner cruises, if you will, those types of things on the river. In addition to, of course, with the tall ships, and so this would just be an added benefit, if that's, if you want.
Right, that's all I'm asking.
Right.
Originally, when the pier was designed, it included a floating dock, but we
Didn't have the money.
we didn't have the money. So at this point, if we did want to proceed, the next step, I mean, this is a permitted facility and mainly funded, we would proceed to bids. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. If council decided that this was the direction they wanted to go, we absolutely would go to bid it. We absolutely would bid it.
And then there would be another step to accept it. And because then if there's some gap in money, which there could be some gap, or there may not be a gap, we're not really sure until we go out to bid.
Well, that's correct.
I make a move that we go to bid for the floating dock. Is that the correct verbiage, Mr. Lasko?
You're muted.
That's certainly an acceptable motion.
Thank you.
Second.
And Mr. Barthel, is that okay? That wording's fine. Okay. All right then. All right. So we have a first and a first by Ms. Lurie, second by Mr. Smith, to proceed with obtaining bids for the floating dock. And so we have the motion on the table. At this point, I'll ask a vote. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we will go out to bids. All right. Thank you. Any other thing else regarding the floating dock?
Just keeping in mind that, when the bids come back, we have not obligated ourselves to the dock yet, but you just need to have the bids to see what we're short, if we're short, et cetera.
Right. And I understand that's a very good point, because I understand from talking to Goodwill that they have some interest in making a slight modification within the footprint to accommodate their docking better. And hopefully, actually in the bid process, as these people have expertise, we could get some specific recommendations regarding how that might occur. So I think that would be good to get that information from Goodwill. Mr. Barthel?
So, Madam President, am I hearing that, okay, so if Goodwill's needing to do that and we have to make adjustments to it and we need to go and re-engage with an engineering firm and there may be cost associated with that to properly put out the bid, do I have the ability to go ahead and do that?
Isn't that, this is President, right? Isn't that part of usually state funding that includes engineering?
Well, the fact is we've got $520,000. If I go out and I engineer it and it costs additional funds to do that, that's going to subtract from the 520. In other words, I'm saying if we took it the way with the design that we have, I was hoping we would be able to actually take what we have and utilize that for the purposes of a bid. But if we modify it or we have a need, I'm saying if I have a need to go back to a firm to do that, then there will be a cost associated with it. Now, I don't know. I can't sit here and tell you for sure that if I went ahead and did that, that they would allow me to just utilize a portion of that money for that purpose.
So
That would be
didn't
something
it-
I'd have to find out.
At the last meeting or the meeting, or at one of the recent meetings, did the Goodwill provide a drawing that showed the configuration they're looking for?
No, we have the configuration, and that's what we've proposed to you. They've mentioned that they want to change, that they, and maybe Timmy can address it a little better, and it may not be a big deal. In other words, but I am going to, before I put anything out to bid, I want to make sure that, you know, we're getting accurate information back. And I'm just saying, I may have to go and engage with a engineering firm. And if I have to do that, I can't sit here and guarantee you that the state would allow me to tap into that money for just those purposes. We can try to find out, or we can just simply say, all right, I could also look into it. And if it's an amount that's significant, I could just bring it back to council before we do anything.
I think that's a good point. I mean, Mr. Moore, if you could comment about, I mean, I guess it's an extra little finger there on the floating dock, so the boat faces a different direction.
Yes, the only thing that we would like to comment on is before at the old pier, the boat sat facing the Delaware Memorial Bridge. So, and what ended up happening was with the ship traffic and the wake that it makes, we had issues. It beat the boat up pretty good, and that was, we took multiple safety precautions with how we secure the boat, and it still got beat up pretty good. So Goodwill, we just suggested that if the city would consider that our boat be facing towards New Jersey. And that way, which is the front of the boat, which is the bow of the boat, and that way it handles the wake better and it will cause less damage to the boat.
Wasn't, so that's like putting a T at the end of the dock, across, so that the boat can sit that way. Wasn't there a drawing or something presented here at one point? Because that's where I'm getting that idea, unless I'm wrong.
Councilman Platt here. I'm looking at the drawing, and it looks like from where the pier goes out and it runs parallel to the shore along the pier, it looks probably about 25 to 30 feet back. It sticks out to the south. As far as, there you go, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, well, I was talking about, there would be a T across. You can't see my thing.
Well, and that's to my point about needing to possibly go back to an engineering firm to have them take a look at it, because that was the presentation that was provided to us by Duffield at the time. The people that built the pier provided what we've provided to you, which we have not done anything with. We've not, looked at it from an engineering perspective to say, okay, this is how this is going to work. So what you see is what we got, 8 years ago. So in order to take what they're proposing and go ahead and try to make that fit here, we've not taken any of those steps. So that's the thing we need to do to be sure that it will work. And I think it will, but you know what I'm saying? It's just a little bit different than what you have here.
Do we need to make a motion that, or can we just say that we find out about how you find out about any costs maybe associated with re-engineering that or whatever, and it comes back to council, or?
Well, the other thing I will mention is that Goodwill has, and Timmy can comment on this, has engaged in an engineering firm that they're working with, and certainly we have a relationship with, and we can maybe work with them a little, or at least get an idea to take it by them and say, all right, this is what we got. This is what we're thinking. What cost, if any, would there be to kind of modify this or look at it? I would work. I'd work with those folks. Timmy, you're working with. I don't know if you've talked to those guys at all about doing anything here.
No, I didn't. We're working. Century Engineering.
Century Engineering.
Is who we're working with. And they've been great for us, working with us. They're open-minded. they throw suggestions back to us. You know, maybe we need to think about this, because doing it this way, you know, this, you may encounter this. So it's been a very good open relationship back and forth, and understanding, you know, what it is that we're looking for.
And we've worked with them before as well, and we're working with them now with WMAPCO on this traffic study.
And they do a lot of the two people that I'm working with through Century Engineering. They do a lot of like the state ramps and that kind of stuff. They I'm not going to say it's a specialty, but they do a lot throughout the state.
So I think so. I have two things. One is the city administrator and Goodwill would approach the engineer working on the ramp, because we're all kind of talking about the same equipment, and see if there needs to be some minor engineering, not a total revamp. And then we'll also inquire and see whether we could use state funding to pay for that minor engineering. And if you know, and then you need to come back to council. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay, sounds good. All right. If there's not, do anything else from us, Mr. Barthel, this evening?
And no, Madam President, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? So at this point, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
One thing, did you still want me to obtain numbers on the amount of calls on the river?
No, I was just asking out of curiosity. I mean, like I say, I get asked questions too when people go, when you walk around town, people ask you questions. I just want to know the answers.
Yeah, no, that's just why I'm asking. I know you had asked about numbers, and so I know there was a comment made about going back 5 years to try to get see what the average number is, if call volumes go up, go down. So I just wasn't sure. So I just wanted to verify.
Timmy, that's probably just good information to have in our back pocket if someone says something. So that can just be
Okay.
sent to Mr. Barthel and he can get it out to us.
Okay, I'll do that.
And I would agree with what Ms. Ziersch. I think the state's going to want to know that kind of thing too. Like, plus a realization. I think that one of the other service companies that was doing rescue work on the river will no longer be doing the rescue work. So I think it's just the kind of thing anyone, you know, any taxpayer, citizen, or legislator or state agency needs to know. So I think that's a good idea.
No problem.
Okay. Thank you.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Platt. I'm all in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
See you next Tuesday. All right. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Night.